Blog Talk Radio.
Warning, the following program may include profane language, controversial viewpoints, and perspectives on the true nature of reality so far removed from the status quo, they'll make your head spin like a top. Young children, corporate executives, and religious fundamentalists should turn away now.
Greetings, sisters and brothers of planet Earth. I'm Tim Bravo. Thanks for joining us. T-minus 9 days until December 21st, 2012. You know, the first time I saw our guest tonight, I was a teenager, and he was delivering a forecast on my family's television. Little did I know, that young meteorologist named Scott Stevens would go on to be the only TV weather person with the visceral fortitude to publicly acknowledge the chemtrail program that's right in front of our eyes, more days than not. A trait that cost him his television weather guy gig, but has since earned him the deep respect of thousands upon thousands of truth seekers. Scott Stevens, we applaud your integrity, deeply appreciate the level of meteorological experience and atmospheric understanding that you bring to chemtrail education and research, and we thank you for your continuing service to future generations. Welcome to Extraordinary Year.
Well, I'm glad to be here on this extraordinary year, Tim, and it has been for sure.
Okay, now, before we get going, I want to make listeners aware that I've got a few uploaded chemtrail photos that we might reference as we go through our discussion tonight. You're going to find the link to that page prominently displayed at the top of the description on tonight's show page. The chemtrail topic it's a pretty visual one, and that's hard to get across on a radio show, so I thought it would be good to provide some visual aids tonight, and the chemtrail pilots were obviously very willing to supply me with some decent examples recently. So if you guys want to hop over there, just pull up that page, and as we go, we might get a chance to talk about some of those. So I expect, Scott, that many listening in tonight are aware of you and your research through your website, weatherwars.info, and especially through your invaluable contribution to the recent chemtrail documentary, Why in the World Are They Spraying? So I don't want to spend a lot of time on your background and the whole what are chemtrails question. I suspect most of our listeners are already up to speed on that. Instead, I'd like to spend the time we have tonight delving into the fruits of your years of research into chemtrails and how we can all help end the program and put this all behind us.
Just going to say that's the big one. How do you end this thing? How do you get that done? You know, it's kind of the same as the UFO researchers. You know, we're all kind of aware. It's a buzzword. There's been documentaries made about it. You know, it's even folklore, and yet it's not acknowledged, and yet it's not recognized, and yet there still is this big void in mainstream media with the discussion of UFOs. So, you know, my feeling is this program has been going on every bit of 50 years. And it's just now beginning to get a shadow of the awareness that the whole UFO issue has. And so what I thought would be kind of a quick sprint to the finish line of getting this awareness out there, it is not. This is going to be and has been a long haul for a lot of the early researchers. But I'm just kind of fortunate I came in a little late on the game. Otherwise, I think I'd be really frustrated at this point in the game because this has gone on so long.
Now, you gave a presentation at the recent Consciousness Beyond Chemtrails, or Consciousness Beyond, is it Chemtrails Conference? Is that what it was called?
Consciousness Beyond Chemtrails.
Okay.
Understanding that we're going to get beyond this issue at some point.
And that's where they premiered the Why in the World Are They Spraying? The first piece of video in your presentation, I watched on the web. It featured a small plane, a propeller-driven plane. And it can heard in the video that it's a prop plane, and since it's a prop plane, it can only go so high, and obviously had no jet engines, and still it left a trail behind it. How can that be?
Well, that jet engine exhaust isn't responsible for the trails. That's the only solution, and that's kind of been my assertion and observation over the better part of 10 years. You know, I've always been an alternative media guy. Coming from the mainstream media, you know how much of the story gets left on the editing room floor, how much of it does not make it past the producer. how much of the story is cut down so it fits 15 seconds, so it fits 25 seconds, so it fits 90 seconds if you're lucky. So I was aware of that. And so I've always wanted to look for the rest of the story. That's always been a really kind of keen desire of mine. And the chemtrail word came up in my alternative media search back in the late 90s and in the first part of this past decade. And I'm like, this is a little weird. What is this chemtrail thing? And, you see pictures. I'm like, yes, granted, that's a nice big fat trail, but, those can be explained away as condensation trails. And then I'd see pictures of, say, the lines in the sky of one plane, essentially it looks like they're flying in formation. And I'm like, well, they have to keep a separation between these airplanes as they fly through their airways, and we're just seeing the stream of air, the parcel of air moving through that flight path. And so the planes, as they move through there, leaving a trail, and so you're getting these regular stripes. And so there's a lot of rationalizing that can be done to, dismiss the whole contrail chemtrail issue. And at the same time, Tim, I was kind of researching free energy. That was really where my heart was how do we get ourselves out of oil, out of nuclear energy, out of even solar and wind, which are just renewable. They're not permanent. They're just renewable. That's where my head was. And so I came across the work of Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden and his website, chenier.org, CHENIERE.org. And, after visiting that site a couple of times, I ended up on a page that was subtitled or had a sidebar called Soviet Weather Engineering. And I was already a little receptive to Colonel Bearden's work, and as I kind of read into the story and a little bit of the backstory and the contextualizing of how they're capable of moving heat from zone to zone to zone, and understanding thermodynamics, and how a thunderstorm, how a snowstorm, how a hurricane, how a tornado, all of these things require heat. Moisture is a nice additive. You get the two together, and you can make some unstoppable weather. But Colonel Bearden was articulating a technology that allowed those operators to literally pull heat out of a portion of the atmosphere and deposit it somewhere else. And on his website, they were having to literally dump the heat out of these massive, like 3 Mile Island, nuclear reactor chimney stacks way in the far northern Siberian region. And so there were these massive plumes of steam. And he was in Army intelligence, and this was the early to middle 80s. And as a physicist, he was aware of Tesla's work, of over-unity. He was kind of aware of the exciting side of physics that hasn't really made it mainstream yet. And so eventually his team ends up briefing the executive branch or Ronald Reagan's office on these Soviet weapons in the 1983 time frame. And they'd been operational for the better part of 20 years. And so when you can manage heat, you can create hurricanes, snowstorms, droughts. It becomes very, very basic to deposit heat in a very strategic location, and a thunderstorm collapses. The thunderstorm collapses, you get an incredible downburst, you get an outflow boundary, you get some cooler air, some sprinkles, but that's about it. And what we have seen is kind of an amazing change of climate over the last 30 years, 40 years, since the middle 70s, if you will. And there really isn't anything to explain all of this chaotic weather on other than carbon dioxide. And so this is where the story gets kind of confusing for a lot of people, is how can planes and trails relate to global warming and the ice caps melting? And believe it or not, it's actually all interconnected.
Well, I mean, it's one atmosphere. It's got to be interconnected. I don't think it's a big stretch of the imagination.
And that's the big thing. But what I learned in coming across the whole chemtrail term, because I was convinced from the photography I'd seen on Bearden's website and what I was seeing with my skies in Idaho, is that there was geometry, there were repeating patterns, there were square clouds, there were too many anomalies that just didn't make sense when you studied thermodynamics for weather, heat and humidity and the mixing and moving of air. These shapes were wrong. And so I was open to there being, weather engineering happening around the planet. I just didn't know where chemtrails fit into it. So by the end of 2004, I had my aha moment with some satellite imagery, and I was realizing that I understood why I was having a tough time forecasting. I understood why the guys in Washington, D.C. were having a tough time forecasting, was that there was this delta, there was this change, there was this input into the weather that wasn't accounted for. It wasn't part of the forecast models. It wasn't part of the discussion. It was this mystery subject, and that had to be this weather modification, because forecasting weather is not that difficult. It really isn't. It's not that hard. We understand the atmosphere. We understand how it works. We've got the models. We've got the resolution. We've got the data to do this right. There was just some piece of the puzzle that was missing. And so by the end of 2004, I was really struggling with how do I get my audience a better product. I'm standing up in front of people at 5, 6, and 10 o'clock, and I don't like being wrong. Numerous times I'd forecast a 4 to 8 inch snow, 12 plus for the mountains and the ski resorts, and then the highway patrol's aware of the snow, the schools are planning for snow, the ski resorts are expecting snow, the watersheds are excited. There's all of these things that happen with snow in the mountains, and then the storm wouldn't happen. The storm would come through, the clouds would show up, but it wouldn't snow. And I'm like, what's going on? And as I'm, staying up late, and I'm watching the satellite imagery, I can see these, literally in the infrared imagery, I can see these holes opening up. You've got this nice, calm ahead cloud shield. There should be good rains down to the lower elevations, and snow's up high. We should be snowing. I'd step outside, and it's 2 in the morning. I'm in eastern Idaho, and I can see the stars through the clouds. So I know something's wrong. Those clouds should be thick, they should be dense, and it should be snowing. But I'm seeing stars through the clouds and hearing jets. It's 2 in the morning. There's no way I should be hearing these jets that are flying back and forth, low and slow. And so that has me now wondering, all right, what's up with this chemtrail thing? Is there something to that? I decide to buy some cameras. I figure if I can time-lapse the skies, I can see these artificial waves, these man-made waves that are being introduced into the atmosphere. If I can photograph these waves, if I can time-lapse them, maybe something in the behavior of these clouds will clue me in on what's going on. So I buy 4 cameras, 2 computers, and some time-lapse software. And I set it up around the house, and kind of the northwest, southwest, southeast, and northeast. I'm kind of hitting those 4 corners. And so I set up 2 computers and time-lapse software, and I'd get home from work at the end of the day and, render the movies and kind of analyze them. 4 months in, this was probably mid-April of 2005, I catch a series of flights, and it's a relatively calm spring afternoon in eastern Idaho, and there's a few clouds, not many, but a few. And one of my cheaper webcams, believe it or not, catches about 6 planes, all in about what I could guess was about 25 minutes. And these 6 planes leave very short trails, and 2 of them then leave longer trails. I mean, fairly healthy fat trails. And part of those fat trails actually persists for a little bit. Curiously enough, one of those segments of a persisting trail kind of is floating across the screen. 2 other planes, one goes right through the middle of it, the other one hits the exact eastern end, and in fairly short order. So that's when my light goes off. Aha, this is surveillance. They're laying out these lines, seeing how long they persist, how much of the trail remains excited, whether it's due to moisture, due to temperature, due to updraft, downdraft, subsidence, or actually vertical velocity, or there's another factor that they're measuring. But so they have these different trails. They've got pink ones, they've got blue ones, they've got ones that last 3 seconds, one that lasts 8 seconds, or 9 seconds, or 20 seconds, or some that never dissipate fully.
Yeah.
And so that's what it was about. It was about them surveying what's going on in the atmosphere. The other part of it is that if you want to impact something, let's just go very coarse, and let's use a gun. If you want to deliver your target, or your payload, your bullet, onto your target, how do you do that? You need a sight. You need something with crosshairs. And if you've got a laser sight, even better. And that's what these chemtrails are affording these people, is a sighting mechanism. And then a means of surveying what has happened after the solution has been applied to the atmosphere. So they're constantly out there, back and forth, laying these lines across the sky and then observing what happens to them, what happens to the geometry, the resonance geometry that's in the atmosphere. And these trails are out there measuring them.
Okay.
So then it becomes simple.
Okay, so they're using these to research atmospheric conditions, on top of using them to either enhance precipitation or prevent precipitation. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and the trails are simply there as markers. You can't overwhelm a location with particulates or condensation nuclei, so it becomes more difficult to get rain droplets to the proper size. But at the same time, a gun, a bullet can do good and it can do harm. So it really is neutral on whether it's good or bad for you. It's all in how it's used.
Right.
And this is kind of what these guys are using this for. It's a surveillance and a targeting mechanism. And then there's other agendas probably as well. So once you spend $2-3 trillion on aircraft, and then over 50 years, and then who knows what it costs daily to run them. I mean, it's got to be an obscene amount of cash, absolutely obscene.
And that's going to someone. Not to mention,
it's going to corporations. It's going to corporations.
The stuff that they're actually using, the particulates, the chemtrails themselves are being made out of something. And according to the What in the World and Why in the World movies, we're talking about aluminum, barium, strontium, but mainly aluminum. So somebody's getting that's being bought. And somebody's getting the money for that.
Yeah, somebody has been chosen to manufacture that to a specification in different mixtures, and then for delivery at such and such location on a regular basis. I mean, they've got to be going through hundreds of tons of this regularly, weekly to monthly. This is hoisted aloft. We see some of the smaller business jets. Their payload capacity with maximum fuel is barely 1,000 pounds, but they can stay aloft for 7 hours. So maybe they're just getting better at seeing from space, progressively smaller trails. And it's cheaper for them to buy a smaller Cessna, Gulfstream, or a commuter type plane than it is to buy a 737, 757, or 777. All of those. So.
And you have seen these smaller planes laying out chemtrails.
Absolutely. And all you have to do is look. They're there.
So are the pilots aware that they're dumping this stuff behind them, do you think? Do you have any indications on that? Because we're talking Allegiant Air. I know that was one of the airliners that you showed in your presentation. Surely those pilots aren't aware. Are they being released remote control? What's going on?
Are they actually the planes with passengers on board is what I'm really questioning. Is there not two fleets? That's what I'm seeing. There's two fleets, and they look just the same. The regular fleet with passengers and pilots have transponders. The ones without are without transponders. And so they're communicating on a different medium, a different mechanism, to a different central command, if you will. Whereas that other central command has access to all the air traffic control system in the country, but the public one, the civilian one, does not have access to this system. And there has been a great resistance, or let's just say obstacles, put up from the modifying of essentially what is an air traffic control system that was designed in the 50s. And it's still running today. Mm-hmm. And we know Ronald Reagan, they went through the PATCO strike and fired so many of these air traffic controllers, and they have not updated the system in 50 years. Because if they did, it would probably reveal to everyone this whole other fleet that's airborne every single hour of every single day. They would be seen. So
why don't we have any pilots coming forward? I mean, surely these guys know what they're up to if they're operating some ruse fleet, these fake airliners. Are they just paying the bills for their families? Are they not concerned about their children?
I think that's at a minimum. I think once they have committed to being a pilot, they've got student loan debt, and they need a job. They end up hired first by one of those feeder airlines, the Horizon Air, the SkyWest, the little guys. And I think they begin to kind of get indoctrinated into the corporate culture, and then it changes them. And then I think by the time they get to the point where they're with one of the major airlines, they're aware of it. And I think there's enough suspicious airplane crashes that they're told, you could lose your life, you could lose your plane, you could lose your family. These kind of things could be laid out against these people. And so we have, a fairly tight ship.
I see. Blackmail is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Okay.
When you have JetBlue, like the JetBlue pilot that flipped out, they're going to bring us down, and that happened, just a few months ago. These guys that do this have no problem crashing a plane and killing people. They just don't. It's not a concern for them.
Well, they're not concerned about the people on the ground. Why would they care about the people in the air?
Exactly. And it's just 100 some odd people. Not a big deal. Not a big deal.
Well, if you can kill John F. Kennedy in front of the entire world, then
Or split apart Japan and Fukushima in front of the whole world. That's the kind of weaponry, and advanced weapon that we're dealing with and talking about. And so these pilots, somebody's going to come out and talk about it. I know it. Well,
I was going to say, speak about people who are coming out and talking about it. Here we have you, a television meteorologist, and while we're talking about blackmail and possible conspiracies and people being in on it and not talking about it, you are part of this world, the TV meteorology world, and I've noticed television meteorologists like to refer to when we have chemtrails over Kansas all day. They like to use the term high thin clouds, and they like to predict them as if they know they're coming the next day, and then these high thin clouds will move in. Is this some sort of watchword that's been pushed from on high that you know of? Do you know of television meteorologists who are aware of chemtrails and there's some sort of indoctrination into what to call them and snow the rest of us?
No, it's easy to know when the cirrus clouds are coming in. And with or without the chemtrails, that would be an accurate way to describe, my weather that I had here in Colorado today, and you will have in Kansas tomorrow, is the advancement of the cirrus shield out ahead of the cold front. What has changed is that cirrus shield has been accentuated greatly by these trails. And the weathermen now know about it. 10 years ago, this was not a point of discussion, and they are not told not to talk about it. They're not. Because it hasn't gotten to the point that their bosses would even be aware of the issue. I mean, that would be the general managers and the news directors of the TV stations. They're clueless. They're worried about budgets. They're worried about gunshot shootings. They're worried about getting.
They're worried about posting wires.
Yeah, it's the basic stuff. It's not big news breaking, Nobel laureate kind of material. They're not there, and so the GMs, the general managers, and the news directors let the weather departments essentially run autonomously. And it's up to the weather guys to then interface with the community and use the proper wording. And I've used that, advancing high clouds. It's a very, very common thing in the winter. What has changed is that it is greatly accentuated by the trails. And until I started this research, I would have been oblivious. I would have seen this guy, understood that the moisture was at the higher elevations, above 21,000 feet, and advancing rapidly in ahead of the storm. That's just how they work. If there happens to be trails in there because there's airplane traffic, so be it. That's the way it's supposed to be. So I don't think there's a conspiracy that way.
Okay.
I think the conspiracy is at a much higher level. It is dealing with keeping how do I want to say this? The individual National Weather Service offices, those science officers from figuring it out. The regular meteorologists that are working at the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, they may be becoming aware of it. So I think there's this shadow government that has its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanisms, and they're the ones that have been doing this, and these trails have been in the sky for 50 plus years. So they're normal. They're just normal for these guys. Until you sit down and do it with time-lapse cameras, you would never figure it out. Never figure it out.
It's let me backtrack a little bit. We were talking about the different uses of chemtrails, and I kind of want to I want to cover all of them that you are aware of, and that you've done the research. So really, I'm looking at you as sort of preeminent chemtrail authority. So we've talked about causing precipitation, enhancing precipitation, preventing it. We've talked about researching atmospheric conditions, trying to just kind of keep tabs on what's going on where in the atmosphere, whether it's heat, moisture, and or some sort of other thing going on there. I'm guessing that you might be kind of, and that's an allusion to the ambient energy or zero-point energy.
Yep, that's key.
What about HAARP? I gotta ask. I can't be on an alternative news radio show and not ask about chemtrails and HAARP. What do you think? Are these mirror?
Well, since I haven't been in the program and to know exactly how they use HAARP and exactly for what, I'm kind of speculating. I think HAARP does play a tool, does play a role in this, and like any good engineer, be it a weather engineer or a building engineer, he's going to need a different toolbox, a toolbox with various tools in them. And HAARP is simply one of those tools. It's the Phillips screwdriver, whereas the chemtrail is the chisel. And then there's the sledgehammer, and then the mallet, and then there's an auger. There's all of these different tools that you have in a toolkit. What I believe they can do with HAARP is change the field or the ionization in and around thunderstorms. What I don't know is how big of an area that apparatus up in Alaska can impact in, say, an hour's worth of operational time. Is it capable of running a very quick runtime routine where in maybe 10 kilometer by 10 kilometer segments, it can then run a diagonal along a whole cold front that, say, runs from northeastern Iowa back to, say, Dodge City, Kansas? And can it then hit that cold front with maybe 80 different zones of pulsing to essentially change the ionization of the field, and in doing so, flooding it with negative ions? Then the rainstorm can't develop. It doesn't get excited. The thunderstorm, it has an updraft, it has moisture, but it just can't maintain a coherence. And so the thunderstorm falls apart. So I think that's one of the main tools that HAARP can be and probably is used for. What my question is how big of a field can that one apparatus impact over an hour's period?
What about little radars at airports, National Weather Service radars? They're throughout the country, and what sort of how small a wave, or I guess how long a wave, will actually be reflected off of the surface? A lot of people have said that these are being used to reflect energy into the earth, to create earthquakes. And I'm thinking, while obviously I can consider the possibility of man-made earthquakes, I'm thinking clouds aren't going to stop low-frequency waves. The low-frequency waves are just going to go right through them. But then again, these aren't necessarily clouds.
Well, and then when you add a metallic particle in there, is that going to add to the reflectivity? And probably so. I can't imagine that it couldn't, especially if there is this resonance, this vibration that is just coursing through the atmosphere, that all of these metal particles, all of these ice crystals are then essentially dancing upright in this vibration. And if they're all similarly oriented, then when the radar beam sweeps across them, you're going to get a highly reflective signature, much more so than it would be if there isn't this cohesive resonance in the atmosphere. And so the beam would essentially shoot on through it or see a static or a chaotic field pattern that isn't going to return a signature. But we're to the point now where we see these rings, we see spikes, we see anomalies on radars that have been there, since the middle to early 80s. We've seen these radar rings. And so that has to be some kind of signature, something being returned back to the site. And your regular guys at the National Weather Service office do not have an answer for this, or at least they didn't when I talked to them last. And that's been 4 or 5 years. Maybe there's been a top-secret briefing. I don't know. That I wouldn't know. But these guys are just as baffled by these anomalies. And, if you're going to start playing with the planet's weather, as they learned early in the 1950s, don't tell anybody. then you can blame it on. Then they can blame it on Mother Nature. It was an act of God. And if these disasters end up being an act of God, then insurance companies will pick up the cost, and the economy just keeps on going. So I think that's what they learned with Storm Fury when they were doing a hurricane modification back in the early to mid-50s. They didn't go quite as they planned, and storms turned the other ways, and after that they said, we're just going to be quiet. We'll do all of this experimentation, in secret. And again, we're going back to the 50s, so we're 50 years down this road that they've been very, very interested in weather modification.
And obviously very active at it. They've had a lot of practice. So what have they developed in the meantime?
Yeah, exactly.
And
where have they gone?
What else are they not telling us about? And is it really fair? And I want to get into your thoughts on how this all ends a little bit down the line. But before we do that, at the Consciousness Beyond Chemtrails conference presentation, you were able to visibly show many different aspects of chemtrails and talk a bit about what they meant. And I have to say, being able to look up at chemtrails and sort of diagnose what's going on with them since watching that has given me personally a bit more peace of mind about the whole thing, almost a touch of empowerment, because I think because I know more now about what I'm looking at. So I was hoping we could engender the same kind of fortified peace of mind through education here tonight by looking at different elements in chemtrail photos and telling folks what they might mean based on your years of educated observation. Do you have that page pulled up?
I could probably get downstairs to the computer and get that done.
These photos, the first three are basically all taken about the same time period on one day. Actually, the first 4 or 5 of them, and then there are just a couple toward the bottom that were taken at a different time. You talk in your presentation about how they would fly through chemtrails, and in certain parts would just kind of fade out, and I just kind of wanted to see if maybe people listening in could take a look at some of the things that you were able to point out in your presentation. I don't know that you'll be able to diagnose anything from what I've got online.
Well,
but
I have looked at some of those pictures, and some of them are very clear, and some of them are it's kind of tough to explain what's actually going on. And I've got a time-lapse movie that I just uploaded to my YouTube channel, Scott Stevens or Weather Wars, and it's about 10, 11 minutes of just time-lapse of these trails. And so a lot of the anomalies you are looking at on these pictures that you've put on this page, I have in motion on the time-lapse. So you can actually look at similar situations in motion, and that helps understand it a little better, I think.
Okay.
So
I have just subscribed to your YouTube channel, by the way.
You found it, huh?
Wham bam! Here we are.
I'm still in the process of doing the write-up, but I haven't figured out how to get that most accurate. I kind of think I need to throw a voice track underneath this video. It was called Chemtrail Overload, and it was actually from the very, very beginning of this year. And then you can see where, like on your picture on grid 2, on your page, there's that nice, bright chemtrail with that. Essentially, it ends in the upper left-hand corner, and then runs diagonally across the cars and kind of fades around at about the light post, right, 3/4 of the way across. Now, there's 2 indentations. There's a span across the middle part of the trail. There's 3 trails. There's that little white Nissan car down below. If we go up above it and above the stoplights, there's the X. There's the cross.
Right.
You see that? And what we would see in time-lapse is that there will be clouds that will be forming right there. And I would also anticipate that fainter trail that runs from the upper northeast to lower southwest is actually moving across, probably perpendicularly so, across that other trail, the primary brighter one. And so what they'll do is because they have the precise GPS locations that these trails are laid down. They know altitude, they have the GPS. And so because there's essentially nanotechnology in them, they can watch how far they'll go. Maybe this is another reason why they could use HARP. then they get excite certain zones and get a transponder repeating off of these trails to see how far they've moved from the time they were laid down. I want to look at one of the other fainter trails. It's in between the white Nissan and then the suburban-like vehicle, and there's a light post in between them. And you can see the one trail that ends, or it looks like the plane is right almost at the top of that light pole, that street lamp.
Right.
See how that trail goes then almost straight up, but when it crosses another trail, do you see how the trail it crosses has a flare?
Yes.
Do you see that background where it kind of looks like there's an oval, where the trail is formed into an oval?
Yep.
The angle of the spread of that oval from the leftmost side of the spread matches the diagonal or matches the angle of that trail as it crosses the faded one. It's just about every location where you have a trail cross another one, there's going to be a bend, a twist, a fading point. There is a reason why they cross exactly where they cross. I was going to say that last trail we looked at, the taller, skinnier one that just comes off the light pole. Yeah. There's another brand new trail, maybe just a little bit to the west of it, a little bit to the left, about the width of one of the cars below. And if you continue that line of that fresh trail, it's going to cross. There's another bulge.
I think I see what you're talking about, where it kind of bulges down.
Yeah, you could just just lay a ruler over that trail, and you could over that fresh, bright one, and you can see exactly where it's going to cross, and then has crossed, and the trail behind it. So there's just all of this incredibly sophisticated geometry that they look at, and it only lasts in the sky for moments, and then the data they have gotten out of it has been retrieved.
And so these trails that we're looking at here, this is more, you think, along the lines of the diagnosing what's going on in the atmosphere type of chemtrail.
Sure, absolutely. Because you can look at the picture you got down is noted as different direction. It's the second from the bottom.
Okay.
And you can it's kind of a peakish picture.
Yes.
You can just see all of the different waves and the stripes and the movements, and even that little burst of cloud in the middle. It has little peakings. It looks like it has little waves in there.
Yeah.
That's being excited, and it's a very small scale event.
And if you look at the upper right, Scott, the very upper right has some really they're kind of pronounced waves. And so I see that, and I'm thinking, are they manipulating that with radar? Are they pumping that with some sort of frequency?
And then what I have seen is that a trail will come along, and it will run parallel to those waves, to the orientation of those waves. That's what I see.
Okay.
And so, or it'll be at the boundary of where those waves exist. Those waves may extend to the lower part of the picture, and then there'd be a chemtrail right above it. But that's what they like to do, is highlight the orientation of the waves or the boundaries of the waves on either side. That's what I would look at. But I think if I was going to see a plane fly through this particular picture, it'd be right through that middle burst, just to the right of center.
Okay.
That's what I would expect the plane to go through.
This was an early morning. This was probably about 8 a.m. And if you look at the picture above it, across the moon, the one thing I wanted to point out about that is so many of these trails, even in the first one that we were looking at, Grid 2, these aren't laid out flat in the horizon. These are going at an angle, away from the ground, up toward space. There's so many of these are being laid down at such a severe angle. How do people not see this and ask a question?
Yep, it's like they're building an airfoil, a cross section of an airfoil. I see that often because rare is the trail that is parallel to the ground, to the flat surface. If you're looking to the south or to the north, they're just not. They're not parallel to the ground. They're not in level flight. And down here, I'm already up a little over 8,000 feet, so I'm a mile and a half closer to them anyway. And I can hear them. You can hear them if they're on glide slope, if they're in descent, or if they're climbing, or in level flight. You can discern that. They're outlying. They're essentially rough drafting the shapes that they want the air and the atmosphere to flow. And if they can build a high pressure just a little bit, then that means the inbound trough is going to be a little bit deeper. and it has to weaken to climb this developing trough. But that means on the front side of the ridge of high pressure, then the trough there is going to be deepening. It's going to be strengthening. And one of their favorite places to work is underneath high pressures. And this is what makes them so easy to see anymore, is that they're under those, under the blue skies, and it just happens to work for them, because it's easier for them to engineer a relatively still zone than it is to work the midst of a hurricane or tornado. You would need the different technologies. Let me see if you're in central Kansas or southern Kansas, and it should have been a fairly good day in the morning, but by afternoon I would have anticipated that it got really thick with the trails.
Yeah. There was the kind of day where it's from horizon to horizon, basically living underneath a scrim. And there have been many days like that recently where we start off and the sky is completely clear, except for you at first thing in the morning you can walk outside and see they're starting. And they go at it pretty quick, and they're fast and furious, and by noon you're underneath just a completely covered sky.
Yep, and you've lost your sunshine, and if you're off the grid, that there goes that energy that you're not going to be able to put in your batteries overnight. Or it's a problem. It's a problem, and I'm not sure what we're going to do to free ourselves of this. I'm really not. I figure awareness is our key, and if we can get not hundreds of thousands of people, but tens of millions that are aware of it, then we might make some progress, because we can get more people asking questions. And that's really what needs to happen, is we need more people asking questions.
So do you know of anything, any sort of exposure that might be coming, waiting in the wings? Is there some sort of hope that people can push toward that this is going to be blown open at some point?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Okay.
I figure someday it will, and if we can just get more and more and more people looking up at the sky and asking, then we might be able to round that corner. I think if we could get somebody like Anderson Cooper, somebody in the media. That's what's missing, is the media. If we can get the media engaged on this, then that's going to be our quickest way to progress. We have to get the media engaged. But think of this as an assignment editor, somebody who's got a dozen reporters who can go send out on beats or on stories for the course of the day. But if you assign them the story of contrails or chemtrails, where do they go to enterprise the story? Do they go to the airport? Do they go to the National Weather Service? Do they talk to pilots? Where do they go for information? And that's kind of the big hurdle that we're struggling to get these newsrooms across, is there's nobody for them to go to that is aware of what's going on and can tell the story sanely. There just isn't anybody. And so that's the problem when the station in Yuma, Arizona, or Tucson, or Lubbock, Texas, or Tallahassee, or Wheeling, West Virginia, there's no experts. And that's why I think that's probably the thing that has kept this story from going big. That thing has been the biggest issue.
Well, I know that local news has periodically here and there raised the question. You'll find that every once in a while that some local news has either done a deep story or has just covered it, just asked the question. But they really, you're right, they can't get much farther than the everyday person. Ask the question. Yeah. I mean, and show the video, and maybe wake up a few people that way just by asking the question and showing the video. But actually answering the question is, it's airtight. There's nobody coming forward. They've got an airtight lid on the secrecy on this thing.
Yep, and you really control and compartmentalize the information, and then it does not get out very easily. And this is the news's problem with getting this to be a bigger story. There's no name on their Rolodex to go to, and I suppose I could put business cards out and mail them to every newsroom. Maybe that's something I need to do. But all it would get is a phone call, from because I would say probably every other month the local news station does something on this story. But it's covered about that regularly now. But there's just no They go to the college, they talk to professors, they talk to pilots, they go to the National Weather Service, and that's about the extent of it.
They spend 3 hours on it. You know, they get the assignment at 2, and it's on at 10. And
could be. It could be. And those would be kind of like daytime assignments, so that would be something that would happen in the editorial meeting in the morning, and then the guys have got to be on their way by noontime, and they've got to be back to the station by 2:30, well, probably 3:30, to edit it, write it, edit it, and get it ready for the 5 or 6 o'clock news, and then maybe do a little follow-up for 10 o'clock. But you had to trigger the story, and that is more often than not something that was incredible in the sky that generated several, if not dozens, of phone calls into the newsroom. And when those kind of days happen, that's when we have to hit our TV stations. That's when the weatherman has got to come out from the desk and go outside and actually look at the sky. This was kind of a frustration of mine with how observations are taken with weather now, is that we have really begun to rely on the computers to do almost all of the heavy lifting. And our National Weather Service employees don't go outside to look at the weather and do this hourly observation. It used to be between 48 and 52 minutes after the hour, had to go outside, look out the windows, have a look-see.
Really?
And now, that was the requirement. That's why they paid
standard procedure, huh?
It was. And then in the late 80s, and this word always scares me, the Weather Service Modernization Act was passed. And that brought us new radars. It brought us computers that did the observing. It really automated and computerized so much of the weather process. And I believe it was deliberate in hindsight. It was a little exciting when it was happening, because we were promised to get more and more reliable data. More data from cities that, the observer would go to sleep at, 5 in the afternoon, and we don't hear from them again till 6 the next day. So we were promised to get more information and more data out of more cities. And we did do that. We did get that. But it just took the human element out of it. And another thing that's happened is that all of these new sites that have gone in were installed in locations that are warm. There's pavement nearby. They're on roofs. There's air conditioning vents nearby. There's streets, sidewalks. You used to have at least a 10-foot clearance on all sides from these weather boxes before you could have your temperatures and your rain gauges and all these things. You had to be on natural terrain, and now they've been put in cities. And so these observing locations that have been urbanized. I'm going to use the old town I was in. It was Pocatello, Idaho. There was the weather site that originally happened at the university, up on a hill, and it was a grassy area. And then in the 30s, the airport went in, World War II happened, and so the observing site was removed from in town. And so often it was the post office at the beginning. It was the post office was the heart of it all. And so from the late 1800s, they moved from post offices, and then in the 20s, 30s, and 40s moved out to the airports. And then they've stayed at the airports, but they've also added additional reporting sites in town, 3 or 4 or 5 of them. So that instead of having one location out at the airport on a grassy knoll, if you will, now we have 5 sites in one town, and 4 of them are urban. And then when you go to add the temperatures, all of a sudden they're beginning to bias warm and warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer, because more and more of these stations are reading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees above what the typical baseline should be. And that has been the source of so much of our warming that we've had as a country. So that's just another aspect of this whole weather modification thing that's going on is the controlling of the data going into the system, into the climate system. So there's multiple agendas here that play into chemtrails, weather modification, global warming, and the need for a carbon tax. Somebody's got to pay for it all.
Well,
this has.
Talking about how we're going to get this blown open, and the fact that it doesn't look too hopeful unless, we have more and more people waking up. You mentioned, though, there being a story about, people going into the newsroom because they saw something amazing in the sky. Maybe the thing that brings chemtrails down won't be chemtrail awareness at all. Maybe it'll be a different kind of awareness that will bring down the powers that be, and then the rest of the big picture can be laid bare, including the chemtrail issue. And obviously, you probably can tell that I'm suggesting the UFO issue.
Yeah, it's time for that to happen, don't you think?
I really do. Here we are, 2012, and let's do it. So,
and it still hasn't happened.
Because if it did, it would be the end. It would be the fact that they have had this contact and kept it under wraps, the fact that they have had this technology and kept it under wraps and kept us tied to gas companies and pumping out major percentages of our, of our yearly intake is just going straight to Shell or ExxonMobil. People will lose their damn minds when they find out that they've been snowed all these years and didn't have to be. So, just the fact that we're not alone. There's so many things. When that UFO secret breaks open, the whole thing comes down. Because they cannot retain power. They cannot retain the secrecy. Because once they're kicked out, all secrets will be laid bare. This chemtrail issue will be laid bare and immediately stopped. I have no doubt.
I hope.
So, maybe it's a two-prong attack here. We go ahead and keep trying to wake people up to chemtrail awareness, although I just don't understand how people can go outside on a daily basis and not see what's going on. But obviously they're not. They're just accepting that those are contrails and those are clouds and this is what the sky looks like. But it doesn't. It's not normal. It's not natural.
They trust. They trust.
That's true. They do. They trust.
They do. They trust that our government is telling us the truth. They trust that the FDA has approved aspartame and it's good for us in our diet sodas. They trust that there were weapons of mass destruction. They trust that Osama bin Laden, brought down the towers. They trust. And until that trust is broken, and I don't think that we know exactly what is the issue that is going to break the trust for everybody. But I think you're right that more and more people are questioning. I was, during the 8 years of Bush, I was just floored that people could support him and aggressively so. And all of a sudden we change parties, and then the right grows some balls about foreign policy and spending and all these things. And where were they 8 years ago? So there's got to be something that comes along that will unify us. Something, and it's not going to. Maybe it is the UFO. Maybe there'll be, there's going to be an incredible comet at the end of this coming year. ISON. It's 2012/C4 is the scientific name for the comet. But it's going to become a brighter and brighter object in our sky, and if it's even close to what is kind of forecast right now, it could be the brightness of the full moon, and then be in the northern sky all night long at some point, October, November, December of this coming year.
You don't happen to know what hue that comet might have?
Yeah, red or blue. I would guess blue if I had to choose.
Wow, blue Kachina, Hopi legend.
Could be. So, I think something big is coming along that scale that will kind of get people outside, looking and asking questions. But 2012 was an intense year. We had an amazing, long, exhausting election, but it has been relatively uneventful for us as a country outside of the election. We haven't had a big economic crisis. We haven't had a big geophysical event outside of the extensive drought that's still in place.
By the way, it put in place, right?
Put in place. Oh, absolutely.
And the economic hardships that go along with it are manufactured by chemtrails.
They don't have to be. And see, for me, I think there's a 0 point coming. There's something big coming, and that's what they're reticent to share with us. They don't want to share us with us, whether it's something to do with December 21, 2012, whether it's 0 point, whether it's impacts from space, whether it's Nibiru. There's plenty of things it could be. That which would unite us as a race, as a species on this planet. And I think they're aware of it. I think they're preparing us for that quote-unquote arrival of this event. But I don't think they're lifting us up. They're droughting us. They're stressing the planet. They're poisoning the water. It's all there. I mean, they've looted the national treasury. There's just nothing left but IOUs. And so I think they're really victimizing us, so we cannot participate as an individual and as a people in whatever this big event is that's coming. And I think that's part of the reason. I think that's the primary reason for the drought, is so that we're victimized, and a part of us is missing, is people. We're not whole. And I think they're very, very good at just nitpicking, like death by 1,000 cuts. And I think that's what they're constantly assaulting us with. And weather is one of those tools that for 40 years they have used against us. And I think as human civilization evolves, we'll understand that we can control the weather. And I think within 100 years, everybody will know that it's done. But it'll be done with public oversight and for the good of all.
Because we'll also understand that we can provide for each other and not do this dog eat dog, every man for himself crap.
Competition will be replaced with cooperation.
Amen.
And we are taught very early on that competition is king. And that's what the whole education system is about. Who
healthy
has
competition.
GPA. Healthy. Yeah. But it becomes sports. It becomes, it permeates our society is whose we are the champions. And I think our
for there to be a winner, there must be a loser.
There has to be a loser. Yep, exactly.
And in a board game, I think I'm okay with that. I'm not trying to piss on competition in all cases, but I think as running a planetary civilization, it's a very poor means of going about things. You made the mistake of mentioning Nibiru. Yeah, and you can stop me or just say that you're not comfortable talking about a certain thing. But having talked with you last week, you had mentioned that you might have an insider connection that seemed to be telling you there are some things coming at us beyond the year 2012, that 2012 was kind of a distraction, and that the things that are coming at us in 2013 are going to be astounding. And you seem to be pointing out that there may be a real Planet X. Can you tell us what you know about this?
I've always been fascinated with astronomy. My dad and mom and dad gave me a telescope when I was 12. And so from that Christmas on, which I think was 1978, 79, I have been fascinated with the sky. It's something that is just, it's in my blood, if you will. And I was aware of the discovery of this object in 1983. It was hunted down by an infrared telescope, IRAS, Infrared Astronomical Observatory, and it was one launched into orbit, and a nice little New York Times piece on this big thing coming to the planet, and then all of a sudden the story's gone. And about that same time, this person I know was in the military, and as a relatively young person, I mean, not much older than about 20 years old, being briefed in Tucson, Arizona, at Kitt Peak National Observatory, that there is, another planet. We've always known about it. We have an agreement with them, and that they can intercede if they choose to in human affairs. But more often than not, they do not. And that's, kind of a spiritual understanding that, you have to allow peoples, families, cities, nations, countries, planets, they all have to have their lessons. And they have to be left alone to learn their lessons. Otherwise, if you come rescue them, what's going to stop them from getting into the situation once again? And so apparently we have this agreement. And I've become aware of Zachariah Sitchin's materials, and I've read all of his books. And some of it matches and some of it doesn't. And whether it's bloodlines, which is kind of a fascinating thing, whether it's giants or pyramids, there's a really fascinating history of the human race on this planet. And what I find even more interesting is so much of it is, for some reason, kind of left out of texts, out of school books, out of history, out of geography, out of geology. There's just big gaps in our understanding of our history, and that has me even more interested in all of this. And so I don't know, through this person it was shared with me that there is another planet, and I think we're not that far off from seeing it. If Sitchin is right, his earlier books, we're about 15 years out. So we'll see if his timing is anything close to correct. But I would suppose that the professional observatories already know where it is and can point their telescopes at it and see it. I think the atmosphere of this planet keeps a lot of the amateurs from seeing it in the infrared spectrum. But some will see it. And if the movie Deep Impact was anything close, then it'll be an amateur astronomer that'll herald the arrival of whatever is interesting out there, whether it's Nibiru or one of its moons or a dwarf star. I don't know. But the professionals know where it is. They know where not to let us point their telescopes. But I think it'll be the amateurs that'll discover it in time, and probably not that too far away. Probably not too far away at all.
Well, it's interesting that David Wilcock, who's had his head down for a while, hasn't really had a lot to say for months. Just this last weekend, had a short post. In the middle, he drops this bomb that he now believes that our solar system is actually a binary system. And what that means, I know you know what that means, but for listeners who don't know what that means that our solar system actually has two stars that kind of have a central point of gravitation, and that this other star is a brown dwarf. That's why you can't see it. It's not burning. It's like a gas giant, like Jupiter. But I don't know why he believes that. Whether it's his insiders have said that, or through a vision or whatever. But that to me is significant, and it just blew my mind, because I've always thought of us as a single star system. We all have these planets that evolve around this one star, but we know that so many, especially visible star systems, are at least binary and have at least two stars in their system.
Yeah, what is it? Something like 70% are binary systems or trinary systems. And it is odd to be a solo star system. And we can see a lot of stars from where we are, and we've got a lot of proper motion and orbits, and there's a lot of research done in the 17 and 1800s on binary star systems. And we're like, where's ours? Where's our companion? It's got to be out there somewhere. The planets are still, the gravity of the outer planets is still a little tweaked. There's still something out there that mathematically and gravitationally we see.
The outer part of our solar system has some anomalies that aren't explained. If you look at us as a single star system. Yep. And so the things that your friend did your friend give you any sort of timeline? No.
I don't think one was shared with him.
Okay.
I really don't think one was shared with him.
I mean, anything else that he might have intimated about that's coming at us? Anything? Any juicy little ideas for us to look forward to?
What he's seen lately has been water. Lots of water. One impression he was given about 2 months ago was lots of Floridians with lots of trucks leaving their homes forever. That was kind of the mood of that impression. The other one was also in the southeastern states, and it was big grassy yards or fields or prairies, not quite prairies, but big grassy fields with big oak trees and moss hanging on them. But it was a sunny day, a warm day, and the water was coming in. Water was rising. Just water was coming in, and people again retreating. Another recent one was in a high alpine valley, almost like Nepal, where there's very, very short shrub and short brown grasses. And a stream with a person, fishing by the side of a stream, and then that stream grows to the point where the man is lost in the flowing water, and what were 1 foot, waves or ripples or rapids, becomes 20, 25 foot rapids. There's so much water on the move, and so this has been kind of a theme that's been shared with him. And he's kind of an older bloodline, and he's just very easily can drop into a delta brainwave, where he can sit down and go into meditation. And all of a sudden, there's stories and there's communication, and those kind of things. But the water on the move has been the big one. And then there's been two recent California is gone kind of dreams. Those have been present lately within the last 18 months.
Oh, so, I pray for my friends out there.
Yes, and your friends are probably having their own guidance coming in as well, their own dreams, because it's just the planet's waking up.
Well, and as far as sources of water, I mean, aside from melting ice caps, raising water, there are other sources of water, and our solar system is entering an interstellar medium that has more charged particles. And we know that the sun is going to be waking up, and that, sun is constantly spitting out elements that cool into all sorts of things. A lot of them are hydrogen and oxygen, which bump into each other and create water, just hanging out there in space. And the water on the moon, the water on all the planets, the water in our upper atmosphere that, water can't evaporate into the upper atmosphere, correct? I'm asking a meteorologist.
We tend to work with the lower part of the atmosphere. It's just more exciting down here.
But I guess the impression I have is that it's from 20,000 feet up, there's not going to be a lot of water evaporating up that high, and we have all these noctilucent clouds showing up. We're getting water coming into our system from outer space. Yeah,
exactly. I think that's the bigger. We accumulate water rather than sublimating it off into space.
So I guess if he's having those visions, that is a possibility that we receive a large influx of water that there's nothing we can do about.
The other part of it kind of goes with Cliff High's work at Half Past Human, in that Cliff has kind of really jumped onto this expanding Earth theory. And from his work, he's got the Earth expanding 0.03%, coming up, really getting underway next year. And a lot of the imagery that his linguistics model keeps showing is primal waters. And essentially is that as the planet does its growth, there will be seams, there will be openings, and water will just be coming up from inside the planet.
Huh.
So it'll be issuing forth from below. Whether it's our young ocean floors and all of the seams and stripes and openings that come up from there, or whether it's from new openings, new springs, new artesians on the continents, it's probably a combination of both. And then if we go through this electrically charged aspect of space, inbound comet, who knows what kind of electrical connections could be made if there's an attendant, brown dwarf in the system. We really kind of throw a lot of cards out there. If you bring it in, another body from the outer solar system, and if you can electrically create water with your hydrogen and oxygen, then voila, we've got water coming down from below and coming up from above. And then
that's an awful lot of fuel if we actually shift to ever using it.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But if we figure out how to use that, then we could probably, just go to the 0 point, the morphogenic field, and then, we can split the planet open with something the size of a quart jar. We could release that much energy. It's just there. It's just there. And I think that's why they're so... Yep, I think that's why they're so afraid of UFOs showing up, is the UFOs would show them a different power system, a different means of getting and generating electricity. And then that would mean an end to their paradigm.
And we need that. We need that. It's the answer for all of humanity, not just the elite. The answer for all of humanity it would be so easy. And it's obvious that
solves
that's their agenda.
Issues. Yep, that is
Keep
their
us
agenda.
Away from that. I've been looking into the work and tales of William Cooper, and I was curious if your friend had mentioned anything in the way of DUMBs, deep underground military bases, and or connection to extraterrestrials in his military career.
Well, the underground bases are there. That was one of his trainings, was to go there when needed. They were also shared that there's a list of who will be available or welcome on board those locations when the time comes. You cannot have all these bases without some kind of a mechanism to connect them all. And so you have, the underground tunnel system, the train system that Phil Schneider, the geologist, that worked to
helped build.
That helped build. And it was, the late 70s when he had his firefight with the Greys down outside of the one outside of Dulce, then over to Mexico.
Yeah.
Dulce, the Taos hub.
That is a hell of a story, and I've heard about it for years and gotten kind of a gist of what it's about. It wasn't until last 2 days I really looked into what occurred and what was going on there and why it happened and who was involved. And this would make a blockbuster movie. I mean, forget Independence Day. I mean, it's got all the elements of the American public. The Western public would eat this story up if they could get it out there.
Yeah, I agree. That's just one story. There's probably so many that have happened over the last 60 years that would just be, it would make the X-Files blush. And the Fringe series, lots and lots of material, and Stargate, and $6 Million Man, and I mean, there's all kinds of TV that could happen out of this. And I'm sure some of these stories have gotten to the mainstream. I'm pretty sure that Stargate is, well, they even said they had some insiders giving them storylines. So, there's truth out there, and these secrets cannot be held forever. They can't be. The truth always comes out. It always does. And so that's just a matter of time. And I think as we lose the financial aspect of the Western way of life, we're so saturated in debt that can't help but collapse on itself. And I think once that happens, then I think we're really going to be free to, dig through the archives and the Library of Congress and DARPA, and we'll get through all these things, and we'll understand. We'll understand exactly what's been done. Much like when the Allies went through Berlin and, discovered all of their atrocities, we'll have the same kind of thing happen with America and the Western world. We'll do a forensics, on America's atrocities. And, a lot of it was science, and some of it was not good at all. Was not good at all. But we'll get through it.
Let's get on with it. Well, here we are 9 days away. 9 days away from December 21st, 2012, this date that we've been focused on for years. And, it's 9 days away to the future. It's unwritten. It could still be something absolutely giant and huge and wonderful. But, all indications are it's going to be business as usual until up to and after.
Yep, this is true. And the farside.org at HalfPastHuman, both of them don't see anything on the 21st. Nothing really gets going until like late January, but certainly February and March. Then I would tend to bet on March. And both of those organizations, Cliff's work at HalfPastHuman, it's gaps in the data, where essentially the internet goes silent for a period of time, where there's nothing. So is that
no.
an ESP? Yeah, no Facebook.
How many suicides would result?
I don't have anything to say to
that. Not me. I just have a hard time.
Yeah, I look forward to the day without Facebook or without all that. It'd be nice to have that all taken away.
Yeah.
Yeah, kinda. It's just it becomes too much at some point. It's too much. As
long as we have some other way of reaching information outside of the mainstream, what's sanctioned for us to know.
Yeah, well, that's why we have ham radios.
Go back old school.
Yep. I think that's what's going to happen. We go
Get
back
on
old
the
school.
same frequency.
Yep. I think that's going to be the way. I think that's what's going to happen. I'm completely unprepared for that scenario, just so you know. So, but I think that's what will end up happening. And whether it's the sun, whether it's kind of a war thing, I don't know. But something happens. Farsight.org calls it displacement waves, and what they actually see are impacts from space. What's the progenitor for that? Is that the brown dwarf? Is it Nibiru? Who knows? But there was even the Rand Corporation had done a study or a paper, and it was essentially titled "Dealing with 1,600 Impacts," in the United States. That's a lot of asteroids, or that's a lot of comets, or a lot of meteorites to actually hit the surface of the planet. But that's what the title of the paper was 1,600 of the United States. So that would kind of change our landscape. I believe that would change our priorities.
Well, it would probably change the atmosphere for quite a good time.
Exactly. So does all of this hand-wringing over chemtrails really matter? If that's what's months away. And if it's something even greater, something more dimensional, and I believe that's a very real possibility as well. And that might be closer, or maybe that's March, April as well. Who knows? But I don't know. We're all prepared for something. We're preparing for something, and it should be beautiful. It really should be.
Well, Scott. I was going to say that sounds like I like to ask the guests to kind of leave listeners with a kind of a last word. What's your lasting message for people listening in? So what do you have for people?
Well, get to know your neighbors. Reacquaint yourselves with your family, because with whatever goes down, those are going to be the people that are around you. We need to know them. We need to have relationships with them. We need to have them, as friends. And I'm so thrilled to have been able to move to a community in Southern Colorado, within the last 4 years. And, it was because of dreams that ended up in this location. But it is the people here that I would look forward to going through whatever comes with. I would like to be able to go through it with them. And I think that's something we need to kind of get in your prayers is, bringing the right people to you. I think that's terribly important. That and food. I think food is, we're going to want to be able to cook for others. You're going to want to be able to cook for others when the time comes. We saw what happened with New York and Sandy and, all of that. There was so much generosity and so much sharing and friend support and cooperation. I think that's what these big disasters can do for us as a people and as a planet, is to get us out of our iPhones and back to our humanity. And that kind of good can come out of whatever's around the corner. Whatever's around the corner, because 2012 was an incredible year, and 2013 is going to be amazing. And I want to talk with you towards the end of it.
Okay, well, and I'm about to tell people about how that's going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah, because next week is actually going to be the last episode of this show ever. So I'm going to be explaining to you guys listening out there what's going to be happening going forward. So, Scott, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us tonight. Everybody, go check out weatherwars.info. And if you haven't seen it yet, go watch Why in the World Are They Spraying? Because education is key, and being able to educate other people is key. Thanks so much, Scott.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay, so before we go, I'm going to make this announcement. My sisters and brothers, next week will be the final episode of Extraordinary Year. As you know, this show has been all about the year 2012, and obviously that year is about to end. So it seems fitting that the show should also come to an end. I know this is going to be a disappointment to many of you, and for that I'm sorry. And believe me, it's been a fantastic journey for me, and you guys know how much I love having these live conversations. But even though 2012 and Extraordinary Year are ending, it's obviously not going to be the end of the world, pun intended. I will still be putting together shows. They just won't be live, and they won't be called Extraordinary Year. I will still be sharing the best online content I can find, and I will be participating with you on a Facebook page on a daily basis. The new show will be a podcast called Bravo New World, and it will be based on the blog I've had for years by the same name. I will still be bringing you guys the most amazing and topical interviews I can arrange. Interviews as amazing as tonight's. I will still be holding conversations with my main circle of friends about world events from a lightworker's perspective. I will even be inviting you to Skype in for conversations from time to time. I will still be syndicating the shows to YouTube and iTunes, etc. If you want to get a jump on the new show, head to the blog and sign up for email updates. It's bravonewworld.blogspot.com. You'll find the email subscription window on the upper right of the page there. You can also get on the ground floor of the Facebook community at facebook.com/Bravo New World Blogcast. One word, Bravo New World Blogcast. Plus, remember guys, this year's not over yet. I, for one, am still holding out that something huge is going to happen on the 21st. So take heart. Please join us live next week for the final show. If this show has touched you, but you've never quite gathered the courage to call in and add your 2 cents, I would love to hear from you. I'm inviting all of you. Yes, you. I mean you. Call in. Share what this extraordinary year of 2012 has meant to you. So I appreciate the time that you guys have given to me. I hope that the time that I've given to you with Extraordinaire has been of value, and we're just going to move forward together into the future, just in a little bit different format, call it a little different name. So that is it for Extraordinary Year on this 9th day before December 21st, 2012. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Tim Bravo. Keep your ear to the ground and your eye to the sky. Do not be afraid. This is an extraordinary year. Peace is on its way. Namaste, y'all.
Won't make you read between the lines too many times.